Hey everyone, Zarkoon here with another World of Warships Legends video, and in this one I have a review of sorts of the new Tier 4 French battleship, the Bretagne. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, feel free to let me know. I may very well have butchered it, but we're not here to talk about the names of the battleship, no. Nope. We're first here to talk about the most important feature on any battleship, and that is the guns. So you'll notice right away that there are 10 of them. They are 340 millimeters in size, and they are held in 5 turrets of 2 guns each. Now this 340 millimeter size at this tier, it's probably right about in the middle range. It's bigger than the Koenig at 305 millimeters and smaller than the New York at 356. And the AP penetration values of these guns on my build, it's maxed just above 10,000 damage. I think it's 10,070, which is pretty comparable to my other builds at the same tier. The HE damage that these guns can put out, maxed at 4,700, with a 26% fire chance on my build, which is a medium type range for the tier. The New York, for example, 30% fire chance, Koenig 23. The turret traverse speed, 47 seconds on my build for a 180 degree turn, which is on par with the other ships at the same tier, and same with the reload of 30 seconds. Now, I'll tell you, on this ship, I am running the aiming systems mod to help with the dispersion, and I also am running the French battleship commander Jaujard. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. It's spelled Jaujard, and he is the French battleship commander whose base trait increases the battleship's AP penetration values, which I think I've seen a few people on a Discord server say that that's useless for a battleship. I disagree. I think that is a good thing for this battleship, and it's probably going to be a good thing moving forward for the French battleships in particular, because the interesting thing about the guns on this ship, remember I said they are 340 millimeter guns, we're at tier 4. The interesting thing about that gun size is it carries from tier 4 all the way to the tier 6 Lion, and judging by what I can see on the stats pages for these battleships that are in early access, I don't have all of them. I have the Corbeil and the Bretagne, but judging from the stats that I can read from the Lion, its 340 millimeter guns have a base max AP damage value of 9,500, which makes them, I believe, the weakest guns at tier 6. So this guy, Jaujard, is probably going to be very valuable moving forward down the line. You'll see that these guns right here with this Königsberg have really no problem shooting AP and doing massive amounts of damage on broadside cruisers. You see these shots go out. They hit the Königsberg nicely for a Citadel, about 11,000 damage I think that was, and he's almost dead. So, sorry, Siri was on for some reason. So, no problem against enemy cruisers. Let's talk about survivability on this thing. With the hull upgrade, it's got 41,700 HP, which is pretty on par with everything else in the same tier, although it's actually a couple thousand points lower than most of them. Now the armor is interesting, 10 millimeters to 400 millimeters, which is a lower minimum value, okay, and a higher maximum value than every other ship at the tier except the Congo. Now, I'm not sure exactly what that means because there's no way to see any kind of armor viewer, so I'm not sure where that 400 millimeters is concentrated. But I can tell you that this ship definitely doesn't feel like it's too tough. You don't really want to be taking a lot of hits in it. You want to make sure you're angled against enemy target or enemy battleships. You can angle pretty effectively against them, but you really want to be careful in this thing. Maneuverability, let's talk about that. Max speed of 19.5 knots. Pretty much the same as every other ship in the tier on my builds, except for the Congo, which is considerably faster. The rudder shift I've got at 13 seconds, which is one of the quicker ones at the tier, and the concealment. It's on the higher end of the spectrum on this tier, with a sea detectability range of 14.5 kilometers. On my build, everything else is about a kilometer less for this tier. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, I think we can take a closer look at this battle going on in front of us. You see we're already at 65,000 damage with that hit on the Iron Duke, and we are currently solo capping the Delta Cap Circle. We're up on ships here, or no, we're even on ships here, and we are about on par with points. So the battle could go any way, and we're going to try and take this Iron Duke out right now. And you'll notice as I'm shooting on him, I'm giving him quite the lead. I think I might have let him a little bit too much on that shot, but these guns are peculiar for a number of reasons. The first one is the shells seem to take quite a while to reach their targets. So I find myself having to give enemy battleships significantly more lead than I would normally be inclined to give with any other battleship in this tier. I can explain that in a little more detail here in a second, maybe on this next shot. You see our guns are about reloaded, and we're taking aim at this Iron Duke again. Now he's about 6 seconds away from us, so normally I would lead him just past the first tick on the aim indicator. Unfortunately, the RNG gods were a little cruel to us there, and they didn't give us too much. But normally I would aim a little bit past the first tick at that distance. And you'll see I give significantly more lead than that, and the shells are making them are making it to the target. So I'm not sure what it is about these shells. I don't know if they're slow, the velocity's low, I don't know, but they seem to take a while to get to their targets. And you see there, we lead him midway between the first and second tick. We get a great hit on him for 11,000 damage. That's a Citadel-esque damage, but no Citadels. And we did take our first significant hit of the game from him earlier. Another thing with these shells, besides their rather slow journey towards their target, I find that you generally don't want to aim at the water line when you are shooting at enemy battleships or even enemy cruisers. If you aim up, these shells seem to have a pretty high arc. I was actually surprised on one of the games that I played in this ship. It was on the map Strait, captured the base mode, and I was going back to the base to help defend it. And there was a New Mexico behind an island, and I had my aim indicator on him. I didn't think for a second that I would be able to get a shot on him, but I noticed that that little white island indicator that you get, oh, and you'll see there we were angled pretty well against that Iron Duke. Now I think we're over angling a little bit, but his shells bounced off us and did nothing. Anyway, the New Mexico on that map, behind an island, didn't think I could hit him, thought there was no way. No white little island indicator. I fired and I did hit him. The shell arcs on this thing are pretty high. So for whatever reason, that translates into aiming at the waterline is going to send a good chunk of your salvo right into the water, and it's not going to hit. So I find aiming a little bit above the waterline is good, and at further distances, aiming significantly above the waterline is good, because these shells, by the time they reach their target, say past 11, 12 kilometers, they're basically going vertically, and you can get plunging fire into decks with them, which can be very effective against enemy battleships. In fact, I was shooting at a Koenig the other day, and that guy was about 13 kilometers away from me, angled away. I was aiming for his deck. The shells traveled high up into the air, came down vertically right into his deck for 2 citadels and a devastating strike. So these can be pretty effective when used that way. And I find you don't really get a lot of citadels against enemy battleships with them, but provided you're aiming into the upper hull or even the deck area, you're going to do a lot of damage, a lot of Citadel-esque damage. And you'll see, speaking of damage, we're at 109,000 for this game. This game is probably in the top 3 damage games that I've done in this ship. The best one was 134,000 damage, but I'd say average game, you're probably looking at more like 60,000 at the low end and maybe 80,000 at the high end. And you got to make sure you're aiming your shots correctly. Accurate aim on this ship is essential if you want to do a good amount of damage. And I also find that switching to HE generally isn't that effective. I guess you might try it against heavily angled battleship targets just for the fire starting chance, but the HE shells don't seem to pack that great of a punch, and the fire starting chance I don't think is like anything fabulous. So I stick to mostly AP on this ship, and I find that the AP is very effective against cruisers. It can be pretty effective against battleships provided you shoot it at the right areas of the ships, and strangely, it is weirdly effective against destroyers. I don't really have a good example of that in this game. You can see the last ship on the enemy team here is a Fubuki, and we are going to see him before the match ends and take a shot at him. But we're going to get like 5 overpens, I think, for 5,000 damage, which is pretty typical of battleships shooting at destroyers. But in other cases, I've shot at destroyers that were pretty much broadside to me, which I think should translate into my shells overpenning them. But quite strangely, I've gotten a couple actual penetrations on destroyers with these AP shells, and I think it's because they were turning ever so slightly one way or another, and the shells somehow were able to arm and get actual penetrations. So weirdly, these AP shells are pretty effective against destroyers too. Not something you would think. You'd think you'd want to switch to HE, but no. I say just pretty much shoot AP all the time in this thing. You can see our results here are pretty good, and I think that's all I've got to say about the Bretagne. So if you liked it, give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe, or consider subscribing. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.